They told us Cheyenne Mountain was sealed, locked away since the Cold War, that the steel blast doors had been welded shut, the tunnels mothballed, the command rooms stripped of life decades ago. But when my unit got orders to conduct a routine security check in late 2009, I knew something didn't add up. There's nothing routine about being sent into a bunker built to survive nuclear war, especially when no one's supposed to be inside anymore. The night before we deployed, the briefing was vague, just maps of a tunnel system I'd only seen in history books, and orders stamped with a clearance level far above what we were used to. They told us this wasn't a combat mission. No weapons would be fired. It was inspection only. But the major's face was tight, his knuckles white as he handed out the folders. He looked like a man lying through his teeth. We arrived at the mountain under a low winter sun, our convoy winding past fences topped with rusting barbed wire. The entrance looked dead, massive steel blast doors pitted with age. The paint peeled away until only dull gray remained. But as we rolled to a stop, I noticed something that turned my stomach. The seam of one of the doors had fresh scorch marks around it, as if it had been cut open recently. They didn't tell us who had opened it, or why. The first thing that hit me when the door ground open was the air, cold, stale, but tinged with something metallic, almost like blood. We flicked on our helmet lights, the beams cutting through the dust as we stepped into the tunnel. The walls were thick concrete, lined with old wiring and pipes that snaked into the dark. The deeper we went, the more I felt the weight of the mountain pressing down on us. The silence was the worst. No hum of machinery, no echoes of ventilation fans, nothing. Just our boots crunching on grit and the hiss of our breath inside the masks they'd given us. Someone cracked a joke about asbestos or mold, but nobody laughed. About 200 yards in, the tunnel opened into a massive chamber, the old blast control room. Desks and consoles sat in rows, their panels dark, screens shattered, dust clinging to everything like frost. But the strangest thing wasn't the equipment. It was the way the room looked like it had been abandoned in a hurry. Coffee mugs sat half full, papers scattered across the floor, chairs knocked over, as if everyone had stood up and run all at once. Thought they said this place was decommissioned, Sergeant Walker muttered, sweeping his rifle across the shadows. They did, I said, but this doesn't look empty. Looks evacuated. That word hung in the air. Evacuated, as though something had driven them out. Private Morales picked up a binder from the floor and flipped through the pages. His hand shook. This is dated 1989, he said. Why the hell is it still here? No one answered. We split up to search the chamber, and that's when I noticed the noise. A faint scraping sound, like metal dragged across concrete. It came from one of the side corridors. I froze, listening. Walker noticed me staring into the dark. You hear that too? Before I could reply, the lights flickered. Just once. A flash of pale fluorescence rippling down the corridor and dying again. But in that instant, I swore I saw a figure standing at the far end. I raised my rifle, heart hammering. Contact front. The others spun, weapons ready, beams of light sweeping the empty corridor. But there was nothing there now, just a concrete passage stretching into blackness. You sure? Walker hissed. I nodded. My throat was dry. I saw someone. Morales cursed under his breath. There's not supposed to be anybody down here. We advanced cautiously, weapons up, lights steady. The corridor stretched deep into the mountain, lined with pipes that dripped condensation into stagnant puddles on the floor. My boots splashed as we moved, the water ice cold, even through the soles. The scraping sound came again, louder this time. When we reached the end of the passage, it opened into another chamber, smaller, but filled with lockers, bunk beds, personal effects. A barracks. And it looked like the men who had lived there had left in the middle of the night. Blankets half-folded, boots scattered, photos still taped to the walls. Then Morales stopped dead. His light froze on one of the bunks. Jesus, he whispered. The mattress was stained dark, a huge patch of brown-black that could only be old blood. On the floor beside it lay a set of dog tags, their chain broken, the name worn smooth from years of handling. Walker picked them up, turning them over in his palm. No name, he muttered. Just numbers. This isn't standard issue. I felt something move in the corner of the room. A shift of shadow, subtle, almost unnoticeable. My breath caught. I aimed my light, but the corner was empty. Just a pile of gear half covered by a rotting tarp. Still, something was there. Watching us. The longer we stayed, the stronger the feeling grew that we weren't alone, that whatever had driven the men out decades ago was still here. Then the door behind us slammed shut. The sound thundered through the barracks, and every one of us spun around, rifles raised. But the steel door was closed, sealed, no one standing there. Morales rushed forward, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. "Locked," he gasped. "We're locked in." And then, through the silence, I heard breathing. Not ours. Slow, rasping, ragged breathing, coming from the shadows beyond the bunks. At first I told myself it was an echo, ours bouncing off the concrete and coming back wrong. But echoes don't fog in your mask. They don't carry the wet rattle of lungs that have forgotten how to breathe. The rasp drew closer, then paused, as if sniffing. Walker took a knee beside the door, muzzle up. Morales slid behind a locker bank, shoulders tight enough to creak his vest plates. I edged left, sight lines slicing between bunks, light low to keep the glare off my optic. "Call it in," Walker whispered. I thumbed to transmit. "Raven Actual. This is Raven 2 in lower barracks. We've got..." Static detonated in my ear. Not the clean hiss you get when you're too deep. This had teeth, like a radio stuck between stations while someone drags a nail across the dial. A voice bled up through the noise. Too fast, like an auctioneer recorded at double speed. And then the channel blew open with a screech so bright I flinched. I tore the PTT off my vest and killed it. The breathing stopped. For a full 5 seconds, there was nothing. No drip from the overhead valves, no settling dust, no metal groan from the mountain. Just a void, as if the bunker held its own breath with us. A bunk spring chirped. "Left side," I said, and we moved as one, a slow peel around the locker bank. Our lights licked the frames, the floor, the black bruise of old blood. They found a shape at the far corner, hunched on the lower bunk. It looked like a man in a faded thermal top and canvas trousers, head bowed, hands clasped between his knees like he'd been praying and fell asleep doing it. "And," Walker barked, "let me see your..." The head lifted a fraction. Not a person. A pressure suit hood, faceplate cracked to a spider web, glass reflecting our lamps back at us in a fractured crescent. No face behind it, only dark. Something thumped the other side of the room. Then 3 bunks down, another thump. Like a line of boots hitting concrete in a cadence only the dead know. "Fall back to the door," I said. "Stack up." We edged backward. Dust curled off the mattresses in slow swarms, as if our lights stirred them. The steel door behind us pulsed cold. Morales tried the handle again and swore. "It's like it's welded from the outside." "Breacher?" Walker asked. I shook my head. "Negative. We brought inspection kit. Not charges." The lights flickered. Every shadow in the room twitched as if alive. When the fluorescence steadied, we were staring at a smear on the far wall that hadn't been there before. The outline of human form, arms splayed, fingers like streaked soot. I don't know which of us moved first. Maybe all of us. We crossed the barracks in a sprint, boots biting concrete, cutting through a fog that tasted like copper. What waited beyond was a corridor with a slope imperceptible until your calves began to burn. The air changed from cold to colder, the kind that needles the soft place under your jaw. "Control will have a second egress," Walker said, breath short. "Nothing gets one way in a mountain." Assuming the schematic was honest, Morales said. The corridor dove and bent until we hit AT. To the right, a roll-up door chained and padlocked with an error-correct hunk of steel. To the left, a hatch stenciled in stuttering paint, Bijo/chem storage. My lamp found the red wheel at its center. Grease flaked off it like frozen soot when I touched it. I put my shoulder to the wheel, and the hatch groaned open 2 inches, then 3. Whatever sealed the barracks door hadn't touched this one. Inside, shelves ran the length of the room, each sagging under olive cans and glass ampoules and foam cradles. Labels bleached to ghosts, cholesteric, aerosol, anticonvulsant. Morales' beam hunted across a bench where a ledger lay open, paper brittle, edges scalloped by time. He blew on it and coughed. "Don't," I snapped. "Mask stay on." On the back wall, a cage, chain link welded to angle iron, held a single crate the size of a coffin. Stencils glowed under our lights. 17 Alpha Test Unit. Warning, controlled atmosphere. "The hell is that?" Morales asked. "Something we're not paid enough to know," Walker said. "We move." I should have agreed. I should have stepped away. Instead, I took one more step toward the cage. The padlock was newer than the chain, brass bright amid gray. Its shackle wore a burr of recent grinding, like someone had cut it and swapped a twin in its place. I felt the same wrongness I'd felt at the outer blast door, the sense of history rearranged by a hasty hand. "Someone's been down here," I said. "Recently. Weeks, not decades." Morales' radio spat a syllable, not from his push-to-talk, from the speaker itself. We all froze. Another syllable, soft as if whispered through insulation. It formed a word none of us recognized, a shape of sound that seemed to scrape the bones inside our ears. The temperature plunged. Frost grew between the coils of wire at the far end of the room in a perfect lace, blooming as we watched. "Time's up," Walker said, voice tight. "Out." We slipped back into the corridor. The mountain vibrated. Faint, but steady, a pulse you feel more than hear. We followed it deeper. The slope increased. I couldn't shake the sense that the bunker itself had pivoted under us, that directions I'd trust on the surface meant nothing beneath 100 million tons of granite. The corridor emptied into a chamber with a low ceiling and a ring of consoles dead as tombstones. In the center stood a pedestal with a switch so big and red it bordered on comic. Above it, a sign, "Emergency override, power." Someone had scrawled in pencil beside the letters, "Do not," underlined twice, and then the rest had been scratched away by a blade. "We're dark and blind," Walker said. "If there's any chance we can get internal power and comms." I looked at the sign, then at the shadows, at the memory of breathing that wasn't ours. If there's anything in here waiting for juice, we're about to feed it. Morales took a step closer. "Maybe that's what it wants," he said, and I couldn't tell if he was joking. 3-second press, Walker said. "If anything comes alive we don't like, we drop it and go." He put his thumb on the switch. When it clicked, the entire mountain exhaled. A hum rose from the floor, through my boots, up my shins, into my teeth. Lights banged on in sequence down the corridor we'd come from, one by one like falling dominoes. Fans shuddered awake somewhere in the ductwork overhead. At the edge of hearing, a relay chattered like dry teeth. Then the PA crackled, not with words at first, with a sound like rain on tin. It built until it became a voice, female, clipped, Cold War precise. "Emergency procedure 47. Maintain containment. Maintain." The message looped, snagged, rebooted, bled into another. "Test unit. Non-biological vector. Do not, do not." The last words dissolve in a howl that didn't come from a speaker. It came from down the corridor, where the lights had banged to life. It came from the dark band around which we had sprinted to escape the barracks. It had the pitch of a human scream stretched until it split. "Contact rear," I said, and the three of us swung to cover. Something moved at the edge of the far light. Not toward us. Across it. A smear of density, like heat shimmer in Arctic air, warping the straight lines of the corridor as it passed. It left frost on the cinder block where it touched. The frost sketched fingers, then evaporated. The PA cut to a click. Then a new voice slid up through the circuitry, not clipped, not precise. It spoke in a cadence that crawled under the skin and made a home. "Containment breached at 27. Door cycle override acknowledged." The last word stretched like taffy, acknowledged, the vowel bending until it became several sounds at once, each out of phase with the other. The chain on the roll-up door we'd passed on the right shivered. Link kissed link, musical in the humming air. Morales flinched. "We're being herded," he said. "Then pick a pen," Walker answered. "Forward." We pushed past the pedestal and out another corridor. The hum deepened. The fans found a rhythm. Every 30 feet, a red emergency bulkhead lamp punched a wound in the dark. In their glow, the dust hung like static. A doorway yawned on our left. Small brass sign. EVA prep. 2 suits on steel hangers. Faceplates turned to us. Reflections broken into plates. Each chest bore a stencil. Crew A/Crew B. Beneath them, boots arranged toe to heel, as if the men who'd worn them had evaporated on account and left their clothes behind. My watch beeped once. I glanced down and felt my stomach turn. The second hand had stopped. The hour and minute hands crawled forward, Fast, like they had slipped their gearing and now moved on a different clock entirely. "We're leaving," I said. "We find the second egress. We mark this sector. We return with a team that carries more than flashlights and bad luck." "Copy," Walker said, but he didn't move. He was looking past me, jaw set. I followed his gaze. At the end of the hall, a door waited with a sign I didn't want to read. "Vehicular exit, up ramp." Beyond it, freedom, air that moved under sky, noise that didn't come from electricity. The door was ajar by an inch. Cold air bled through, the kind with pine in it. We walked toward it, 10 feet out. The PA cleared, the old speaker in the ceiling above the door, coughing dust. A new loop played, one line only, perfectly clean, as if recorded yesterday. "Evacuate. Evacuate. Evacuate." The word layered on itself until it made a chord. Morales reached for the bar. The lights went out. Not flickered, died. The hum fell silent. The fan stopped mid-breath. Our headlamps snapped to black like someone pinched their filaments. In the coffin dark, something leaned close enough to miss the inside of my mask and whispered a sound with no letters in it at all. I raised my rifle on instinct in the dark and fired. The muzzle flash punched the room into a strobe. Door, wall, Walker's grimace, Morales' eyes too wide, and between us and the exit something tall and wrong, its edges sliding when the light hit them, like a thing still deciding what shape to be. The flash died. The dark came down again like a lid. Behind us, the bar on the exit door clicked into its housing with a careful, deliberate patience, and the ramp beyond breathed out. Once, like the mountain beneath us had just woken and remembered our names. I've heard men describe combat as being swallowed by chaos. Smoke, screams, gunfire. 100 inputs vying for attention. This wasn't chaos. This was precision. Every sound in that dark pressed in a place like a gear, turning a clock we hadn't realized we'd wound. The exit door sealed with a final clunk, and I knew, bone deep, we weren't leaving. Morales pounded the bar, cursing, his voice cracking in panic. Walker barked at him to stand down, but even the sergeant's steel had an edge of fear now. "Lights," Walker ordered. "Reboot. Check packs." We fumbled in the black, thumbing our helmet lamps. Nothing. Dead. My backup torch gave a sputter of orange before coughing out. Batteries drained, all at once. The mountain had reached into our kit and turned it against us. A glow rose at the far end of the hall. Not electric, not chemical. A sick, bioluminescent green, seeping through the seams of a door marked operations. It pulsed like a heartbeat. Once, twice, each brighter, as if the mountain itself exhaled light. Morales muttered a prayer in Spanish under his breath. Walker made the call. We move. Tight formation. Cover arcs. We advanced, boots striking in measured rhythm. The glow grew, staining the walls until the cinder block looked like it had veins. Shadows rolled across it that didn't match our movement, tall, slow, gliding things that bent without joints. The operations room was worse than the barracks. Banks of consoles ringed the space, every screen alive with static snow, each humming with a low, insectal buzz. The light came from a central pit, sunken 3 steps down, where a glass tube rose from floor to ceiling, filled with liquid the color of bile. Shapes drifted inside, too distorted to make sense of, a limb, an eye, the ripple of spine bending wrong. The static on the screens pulsed in sync with the liquid's glow. Then words scrawled across every monitor at once, jagged as if etched by a shaking hand. You opened the door. We froze. No one spoke. The words smeared, vanished, then bled into new ones. Now we open ours. A hiss filled the room. Vents we hadn't noticed exhaled a mist cold enough to sting exposed skin. My mask filters whined as they tried to keep up. Through the haze, something tapped the inside of the glass tube. A single, deliberate tap. Walker raised his rifle. Negative fire, I snapped. We don't know what containment protocols. Another tap, louder, sharper. A crack zigzagged through the tube's surface, light bleeding from it like blood from a wound. The room speakers screamed to life. Not with words. This time with sound, pure and brutal. A siren without rhythm. Pitched so high it turned the stomach. I dropped to my knees, palms crushing against the sides of my helmet. Morales gagged and tore at his straps, desperate to rip his mask off. Walker yanked him back, shaking him hard enough to rattle his teeth. Then the sound cut. Silence fell, so complete it felt like the world itself had stopped. The crack in the tube spread. A hand pressed against the glass from inside. Not human. Fingers too long, joints reversed, nails like glass shards. The pressure widened the fracture. "Back!" Walker shouted. "Back now." We stumbled for the exit, but the hatch had shut behind us without a sound. No handle, no lock, just solid steel, flush with the wall as though it had always been part of it. The tube burst. Liquid exploded into the pit, spraying across consoles, soaking the floor. Something spilled with it, unfolding in jerks like a puppet on broken strings. It was tall, impossibly thin, its head lolling until the neck snapped upright with a crack. Where a face should have been was only smooth skin, stretched taut and quivering like drum leather. It moved toward us without walking. One blink it was by the pit. The next, 10 feet closer. The green glow drained from the room, as if it were being consumed, sucked into the thing's hollow form. Walker opened fire. The muzzle flashes were the only light left. Rounds smacked into the figure, but each impact was swallowed. No spray, no recoil, just silence. The bullets disappeared into it like stones into water. "Cease!" I yelled, but my voice sounded far away, muffled, as if I were already submerged. The thing tilted its head toward me, and though it had no eyes, I felt it see. Not just me, but through me, sifting memories, pawing through years. Childhood, deployments, faces of family I hadn't thought of in decades. All of it flickered across my skull in seconds. Then it whispered, not aloud but in my head, "You brought the key." I staggered back, ears ringing. "What?" The thing extended a hand, palm up. Beneath its skin, shapes writhed, dog tags, coins, fragments of glass, a rosary bead, trapped mementos of others it had touched. I realized then why the barracks looked abandoned in an instant, why the boots sat toe to heel with no men inside them. Walker dragged Morales toward the far wall, searching desperately for another exit. I couldn't move. My legs were stone. The figure's hand beckoned. Then the mountain shook, not subtly, this time with a force that rattled teeth and cracked concrete. Dust avalanched from the ceiling. Consoles toppled, sparking. The thing hissed, shrill and furious, recoiling like a predator interrupted mid-strike. Somewhere above, alarms wailed. Real alarms, mechanical and human-made, echoing down the corridors. A voice cut in over the PA, monotone, urgent, containment breach. Section Delta, initiating purge sequence. Walker's eyes met mine. We didn't need words. Purge meant one thing. This room, this whole section, was about to be cleansed. Burned, drowned, sealed. Whatever protocol had been waiting 30 years to be triggered. We bolted. A panel in the far corner had buckled during the quake, revealing a crawl space no wider than a coffin. Walker shoved Morales in first, then me, then crawled after. My knees banged steel, dust choking my mask, elbows scraping raw. Behind us, the creature screamed, not in anger, but in something worse. Hunger denied. We crawled until my lungs burned, until the sound of rushing air grew deafening. The crawl space spat us into a vertical shaft. A ladder stretched into black above and below. Without a word, we climbed. Each rung groaned. Each breath carried the taste of old oil and rust. My arms ached, my fingers numbed, but fear drove me higher. The alarms followed us, echoing up the shaft, until a new sound drowned them out. The roar of fire. Flames whooshed below, a backdraft surging upward. The purge had begun. Heat licked my boots. Morales screamed, climbing like a madman, hands bleeding. Walker yelled at him to keep steady, but none of us slowed. The fire rose, chasing, eager to erase. At last, a hatch loomed overhead. I slammed a palm against it. Locked. I beat it with the butt of my rifle, roaring until my throat tore. Then, as if the mountain itself pitted us, the hatch gave way, and frigid night air poured down. We hauled ourselves onto cold concrete. Stars hung above, sharp as blades. Snow dusted the ramp of a forgotten service exit. Chain-link fence twisted open by time. I lay there, chest heaving, mask fogged, watching the sky like it was the first time I'd ever seen it. But even as the cold blessed my lungs, I knew we hadn't escaped. Because from the shaft below came a final sound, faint but certain, the slow, deliberate tapping of glass. Like something had survived the purge, like it knew we were still alive, and it wanted us to come back. The stars saved us, but the stars couldn't explain what followed. They found us half frozen at the fence line, lights carving halos in the falling snow, engines idle and low like animals waiting to pounce. We were cuffed before we could speak, not rough, ritual, not rage, and loaded into the back of a box truck whose inside smelled like antiseptic in winter. No logos, no unit markings, just gray paint and men with faces you forget as you're looking at them. Someone cut our cuffs as the door slammed. A medic slid a probe under my mask seal and read off numbers I didn't recognize. Another medic clipped a sensor to Walker's ear and watched a screen that didn't show a pulse, didn't show oxygen, didn't show anything I could name, only a shifting waveform that looked like handwriting losing its mind. "Keep your masks on," a voice said from the dark. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not remove personal effects." He meant watches, tags, rings. I looked down at my wrist. My watch still crawled wrong, the second hand nailed in place while the hour hand crept like an inchworm. I thought of the creature's palm and the objects inside its skin, of the rosary bead rolling like a fish under ice. I curled my fingers tight until my knuckles hurt. They drove us to a structure that shouldn't exist. A Quonset hut crouched in the trees, half buried, heat bleeding from its seams. Inside light, too much of it. Fluorescents in banks, stainless tables, white tiles so clean I didn't trust them. A man waited under the brightest fixture. He wore a flight suit without patches and a wedding ring he kept turning with his thumb like a worry stone. "I'm Dr. Keene," he said. "You will call me doctor. You will answer what I ask and not what I don't. If you can't answer, say unknown. If you won't answer, say refuse." He didn't ask for our names. He already had them. We gave our account 3 times. Once to Keene alone, once with a court reporter clacking keys like falling hail, once with a camera that had its red tally light taped over. Each time the same questions threaded through like wire. Who cut the outer door? What was written on the monitors? What did the thing say inside your head? I didn't tell him about "you brought the key" the first time. I did the second. He blinked once, slow, like a man taking a step onto a stair he isn't sure is there. "What key?" he asked. "I don't know. I had a feeling though. The brass padlock, the grind marks, the fact that our orders put us there with no breaching kit, as if someone else needed hands to push the buttons while they watched from somewhere safe. They stripped us, delousing showers, steaming, a powder scrub that burned the soft skin under my arms. Our gear went into bins labeled with alphanumerics longer than a social security number. A tech held my rifle like it had whispered to him. They scanned us for radiation, for organophosphates, for anything they had boxes for. The Geiger counters were dead quiet. The chemical badges didn't brown. But when they passed a cheap transistor radio over Walker's chest, it hissed without being tuned. And when they held it near Morales' head, it muttered in a voice too low to be words. "Residual coupling," Keene said to a tech. "Localized." They gave us gray sweatpants and gray hoodies and took us to a room with walls painted the color of wet concrete. No windows. The door had a slot like a motel mailbox. At the foot of each cot sat a plastic tub of personal effects. Mine held my tags, my watch, a sealed envelope with my name stamped in block letters, and a little plastic card that said "read last." I didn't open the envelope. I stared at it until the light felt heavy. Something changed around 0300. We didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard tapping. Glass, metal, bone, I couldn't tell. At 0300, the tapping synchronized with the fan in the vent, turning air into metronome. By 0310, the tapping moved into my head. Not sound anymore, sensation, like a finger tracing letters on my skull. Section Delta. The words were cold. I stood. Walker was already sitting up, elbows on knees. Morales hunched on his cot with his hoodie pulled over his head like a kid trying to vanish. None of us spoke. We didn't have to. We were all reading the same invisible line. The door slot snapped. A guard slid through 3 sealed canteens and a laminated sheet. "Procedure revision," it said. "Reentry, advisory blue team. Escort." Walker read it twice. "We're going back." "Negative," I said. "Blue team's going in. We're advisory." He didn't look convinced. The door opened. Men in blue suits, hooded, visor like a welder's mask, filled the doorway. Their respirators purred. The one in front had a white stripe down his sleeve. "On your feet," he said through the speaker in his collar. "Masks stay on. You will not speak to anyone who is not blue-sleeved." Eyes where they are told. They marched us into a briefing bay. The map on the wall was our mountain, but not like any schematic I'd seen. It looked topographic from the inside. Rooms mapped to pressure gradients, corridors annotated with words like phase slip and time shear. A woman in a lab coat drew circles with a grease pencil, tapping at nodes that pulsed on her tablet. "Your route yesterday generated a wake," she said without looking up. "Like a boat. It's moving through the structure. We need to see what it disturbed." Keen stood to the side, arms folded. He caught my eye and, without moving his lips much, said, "This is not an exfil. This is a conversation." "Conversation with what?" I asked before I could stop myself. He turned his wedding ring once. "With the part of the facility that still believes it's 1989. Blue Team gave us gear that felt heavier than its weight. Handhelds with oscilloscopes grafted on, a meter labeled field coherence that jittered even in the clean air of the bay. A camera the size of a lunchbox with an aperture like an old iris. "It's not a lens," the white stripe said when I touched it. "It's a mouth. It eats light that wants to be wrong." We took the tunnel in silence. The mountain had stopped pretending to be asleep. Even with the fans off, you could feel motion. Slow, tectonic, as if the rock flexed like muscle. Blue Team moved with a choreography learned in a room we hadn't seen. They measured the air with little wands and wrote numbers on tape, stuck to their wrists. Every 50 feet, the white stripe looked back to make sure we were still behind him, still real. At the first bulkhead, Frost traced a handprint we'd left the night before. It hadn't melted. The fingers were longer than any of ours. "Phase echo," the lab coat woman said softly. "How long will it persist?" Keen asked. She didn't answer. The barracks door lay open now, not from force, from welcome. The bunks were exactly as we'd left them, except the blood stain had shrunk to a halo, as if something had licked the center clean. The dog tags lay where Walker had picked them up before, except now, when he touched them with a gloved finger, the chain swung and traced letters in the air like a pendulum riding on smoke. R. "Stop," White Stripe said. Walker froze. The pendulum kept spelling. R-I-N. Morin, Morales whispered. That's a name. We moved on. Operations still smelled like burned plastic. The tube in the pit was gone. No shards, no stain, nothing but a ring of wet concrete like a collar. The monitors were black. When White Stripe powered one, it booted to a screen I didn't recognize, then scrolled text in a font design before I was born. Maintain containment. Maintain containment. Maintain. He cut power. Do not give it what it asks for, he said to no one and everyone. At the far wall, the panel we crawled through was perfectly intact. No buckle, no gap, steel unbroken, bolts cinched. The crawl space that had saved us had never existed. "Is it?" Morales started. Deciding, Labcoat said. "Buildings know the past is an option. Most aren't asked to choose." We stood where the tube had stood. I felt it before the meters did. A pressure behind the eyes, the headache that comes before a storm. The field coherence meter ticked up, numbers turning from black to red. The iris camera word, and then stopped like it had gagged. "Hold," White Stripe said. He set down a case, popped it open, lifted out a device that made no sense. Half tuning fork, half antenna. He struck it against his boot. The tone it made was pure and thin and angry. The air around us trembled. For a second I saw two copies of Walker, one drawn on the other like a bad tracing. A voice came over the PA. Not the clipped woman, not the thing mocking procedure. A man, calm, bored like a night shift at 0317. Delta section to control. Test unit responding to pattern. Send in the observers. Blue Team didn't react like it was a ghost. They reacted like it was a schedule. Time window, White Stripe said to Keen. 3 minutes. If it speaks, do not answer with your name. What? Morales asked. Names or doors, Labcoat said. The lights dimmed, then brightened, then dimmed again. The hum under us found pitch. Something stepped into the room that wasn't a body. The temperature fell. Frost raced across the consoles and stopped at our boots like a dog waiting for a command. The voice spoke again, and my bones remembered it from a place before the womb. You brought the key. Only this time, as the words pressed into me, I felt the truth of it click. Not a brass lock, not a badge. A person, not me. Morales. Walker breathed, almost soundless. Morales clutched his chest and doubled over. The radio hissed near his ribs, the cheap transistor inside his suit muttering syllables that wanted to be a name. His dog tag swung and tapped his sternum once, twice, 3 times, and with each tap the meter screamed higher. He looked up at me through his faceplate. Fog smeared his eyes into moons. "I don't," he said. Behind him, the vehicular exit door eased open without a touch. Night air rolled in, pine and iron and snow. "Freedom, right there. Do not move," White Stripe said, voice glass hard. Morales took a step toward the door anyway. Not choice, compulsion. His boot left a wet print that steamed in the cold, and in the steam I saw letters rise like breath on a winter pane. "Welcome." Walker lunged and hooked 2 fingers into the drag handle on Morales' plate carrier. Blue team moved as a wall to block the exit, devices whining, the tuning fork keening now. The mountain leaned in, and somewhere deeper, glass began to tap again, slow, patient, certain, counting down.